Welcome, Dave Walker MBE.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I'm so excited about this. I'm not going to do any of the talking, she says. That's never happened. So I want to hear your story. Tell us your story, because it's a good one.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for signing up today. Dave Walker, mediator. That's how I define myself. And just to say, I've been very, very fortunate to be involved in all different areas of mediation. I didn't start out as a career in mediation. It happened to me by pure chance. I got made redundant from the job that I was in, working in the city. I'd worked my way up the organisation. I didn't have great qualifications when I left school. So I had to work my way up to the bottom, got up to a certain level in this organisation, got made redundant. So I suddenly found myself having to have a change of career and finding it difficult to get back into the line of work that I was in before. But let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm 59 years of age. I was born in, I'm a Londoner, as you probably gathered, born in Southwark, which is a borough within London. Just to give you a bit of an idea of where that is, it's very close to Tower Bridge. If any of you watch Fools and Horses, Peckham, where Del and Rodney live, is just down the road from us. And equally, we've got Shakespeare's Globe. So give you landmarks there, and Tower Bridge is very close to where I currently live at the moment. So inner London area is where I live at the moment, and lived in this borough all my life. For me, I think I've got the greatest job in the world. Not only is it the greatest job in the world, I actually think it's the skill set and the process that we provide is probably one of the most important things in the world as well. So if you were to go home tonight and was to switch on the news, just have a sit there and look at it. Most of it is around conflict. Most of it is around the lack of understanding and communication. There's war-torn places going on all over the world, and conflict is in every part of our life. It's natural. We have it in our families. We have it in our workplace. We have it internationally. We have it where we live. We have it with our partners. It happens. But the most important part is about how do we resolve it? And that's what mediation is. Mediation is an opportunity for people to understand what's happened, the impact on them, and how they can change things. Now, mediation, also known as alternative dispute resolution, as Simone will know with a legal background, that's something that's quite major. Only yesterday I was giving lectures to law students who are going through their masters in law, because alternative dispute resolution is part of that. For Shane, you, in terms of HR, you would know that mediation can be part of the process in resolving disputes within the workplace. So what will I be touching on today? Because I'm talking about mediation. I will be touching on donuts, out-of-body experiences, genetic engineering, video editing, fire safety, time travel, fire prevention, and mechanics and braking systems. Now, at this moment in time, Anna is panicking and she's just about to hit the mute button and go, what is this guy talking about? But I will come on to that. So I was working in the city and got made redundant. But before that happened, I was the chair of a residents association. And there was a gentleman that was supporting our residents association, and he was a trustee for an organisation called Southwark Mediation. It was one of the first community mediation centres in the UK. He was a trustee, and he approached me and said, Dave, he said, I'm a trustee getting this organisation, this charity going. He went, and I don't know a lot about mediation. Because you chair meetings, you might be good at it. So it got my imagination, and I went along and I got accepted onto the course. The centre was set up to deal with basic neighbour disputes. So I went along and I'd done the training, and because it was new to the UK, the training was very much paper-based, very theory-based. So there was a group of us from the local community that was being trained, and I'd done the training, and I actually thought it was pretty useless, and I actually thought mediation would never work. Having lived in inner London, the whole idea of people I knew that I lived around resolving their difficulties through coming together, I thought was a no-no. So on the last day of the training, they brought in two family mediators, a gentleman called Fred Gibbons and a colleague. Family mediation resolving disputes between couples that are separating and divorcing had started a bit sooner than community mediation. So this guy was quite experienced. So when he asked for 2 people to role play, myself and a senior citizen on the course, who also thought mediation was rubbish, decided that we would volunteer. And we was going to be as awkward and as aggressive and obnoxious as we possibly could to show these mediators up. And we tried. And what blew me away was how this process that we provide and the mediator, the skills that he had, contained me, kept me focused. And I actually found I was walking out of that session, however much I tried, with a resolution, because what I was role playing, I actually got from that. So I actually thought there's something to this. I'm going to actually stick with this and see how this goes. So my journey started by volunteering. So despite the fact, you know, my career was in a mess and I'm thinking, what will I do work-wise? I threw my time into volunteering. Now, working for the centre, dealing with basic neighbour disputes, the charity I worked for picked up a project, funny enough, in Peckham, on the North Peckham estate and other areas around there. So I had to get 110 cases a year from an area that had a 50% less take-up rate. So it was a bit of a mountain to climb, but what was interesting about that was we started to take cases that other mediation centres or people wouldn't necessarily think they would take in terms of mediation. Mediation, people think it's a soft and fluffy option. Well, believe me, it's not. It's a realistic option. We started to take cases of firearms, baseball bats, race, homophobia, and what it was, people would come to us because they didn't trust the police. People didn't have a faith in the court system in terms of that. Cases and situations would happen, and because you couldn't actually prove it, or they felt they wanted to have enough evidence to take it to court, nothing happened. Whereas mediation, you get the opportunity to address that. If you look at people that go through courts, what they want is to know why me and that it doesn't happen again. Okay, now in the court system, you don't always get that. Okay, the person will deny they've done it and plead not guilty, and there is no guarantee that it won't happen again. In terms of my career, I've also been a gangs mediator, so I've worked on shootings, stabbings and homicides throughout London. You can use the mediation process absolutely anywhere, okay? So we started to take cases that were a little bit more extreme than other centres were taking, only purely to hit our targets to start with, first of all, thinking, I can remember a housing officer phoning me up and saying, do you deal with firearms? And I'm thinking, I'm 3 referrals down this month. Yeah, I deal with firearms. And I can remember going up to this property thinking, what do you say to someone who threatens someone with a firearm? Don't shoot the messenger was the first thing that came in my mind. Didn't want to get caught in the crossfire, but it showed that people could do this. Don't overthink mediation. Yes, you do need skills to do it. Yes, you do need training. And yes, you actually have to shift your blueprint of who you are and how you interact. But it is actually a conversation we should have had some time ago and never got the chance to do it. And it's done for a process. Let me explain to you roughly how mediation works. We get referred to people or to parties. What we do is we go and meet with them individually. We spend time with each of them. An average case, I would say I would spend between 45 minutes and an hour with each person. In that place, I'm hoovering up the information. I'm asking relevant questions in terms of how this started, how it's impacted on them, and how they feel it can be resolved. They're the most important parts to me. Now, once we've done that, there is an opportunity for bringing those people together. So this could be a workplace situation, 2 colleagues that have fallen out. It could be anything. It could be a neighbour dispute. It could be gang related. It could be couples separating and divorcing. You can still apply the same process. When you bring them back into the mediation process, the way that we work is that we deliver a snapshot of what they've told us. Now, they let us say what they give us permission to say that. So we will run through and say, look, you know, George, you told us that is it okay if we say that in the room to start the process? Then we'll say to Helen, is it okay if we say this when we get in the room? So when we come in the room, we've got ground rules, and they're very brief, that we talk one at a time. that everything they say in the room verbally is confidential. If anyone wants to take a break, they can do at any stage or call the process to a halt. Mediation is built on being voluntary. No one's forced in that room to do it. The fact that it's confidential when you're working with the mediators, and also the fact that, you know, you're impartial, that you're not part of that dispute or know those people that's involved in it. So we feedback what they say, and then from there we open it up. That's where the conversation comes in terms of looking at and trying to understand the impact. To give you an idea of the fields of work I've worked in and used that process, I'm a family mediator, so I've worked with couples separating and divorcing. I'm a gangs mediator, so I work with shooting, stabbings and homicides. I work with antisocial behaviour. I work in workplace scenarios in terms of what we do. I work with cases involving hate crimes. I work in cases in terms of mediating between the community and large organisations. I do victim offender mediation, restorative justice. So where someone has been found guilty of a crime, you have the opportunity that you can either transfer information between the victim and the perpetrator, or you can actually bring the victim and the perpetrator together if that's what the victim feels that they would like and the perpetrator signs up to it. Now that's quite important, because if the court system and prisons worked, we would just have one big prison that you go in once, come out the other end and never go there again. Now we know in reality people reoffend. We know from our point of view that people can do the crime and actually do the time. But when you actually bring them together with a person it's impacted on, then there's an opportunity for them to think about their actions, how it's impacted on that person, and how it's impacted on their life too. Some of the most interesting stuff I've done with regards to victims and perpetrators is so powerful, because the victim of a crime, more often than not, wants to know about that person. What's your background like? What's your parents like? What's your aspirations like? Why me? In terms of that, they get that, which they wouldn't necessarily get from the court system. The perpetrator gets to understand, you know, if you're snatching someone's bag or someone's phone, they just don't think about it. If you're burglaring someone's house and they're not in, they don't think about it. But actually the impact and the ripple effect is actually enormous. So I deal with, I suppose I'm very blessed on the basis that I can be dealing with people that had violence in the community, to working with a chief executive of a multinational company from one place. I've worked with actors, celebrities that have been involved in conflict or received training. So anybody can be subject to conflict within their lives. Now, at any stage, I'm looking at, I don't think we've got anything in the chat, but if you have a question at any time, please don't be afraid to interrupt me and ask me, okay? One other thing that we do, of the many, is that we train young people to mediate. We train children in schools from the age of 10 up to 18 to mediate. We actually go into a school, we train a group of about 20 students, and then they offer a service within that school. They, of a lunchtime, if it's a primary school, will have mediators in the playground who then bring young people that are in dispute or falling out into a room within the school, and they mediate that. I was very fortunate to be the peer mediation trainer for a while, and it's probably one of the most inspiring and enjoyable pieces of work I've ever done. The whole idea is that, you know, at that early age, we've got young people that are realizing how you can resolve conflict. We demonize young people as being crime, conflict, lost track, they're, you know, out of control, that sort of thing. Young people need the opportunity to know how to resolve conflict. So I can remember, in terms of, let's have a look what we've got on the board. We actually trained in a particular secondary school 14 years ago. And when we celebrated our anniversary, I think it was about 10 years down the line, we actually found the students that we trained before, and we brought them back and we interviewed them. And I think one of the things that struck me about one of these young adult now, she actually said, you know what, Dave, this is now part of my DNA. So I said to my colleague Mel, who now runs the project, right, we're into genetic engineering now. We're actually changing these kids because it becomes part of them. They become like moths to a flame. They have the opportunity to excel. I was fortunate to go back into my own primary school at the Elephant and Castle and deliver training to a group of 10-year-olds who set up a project. And we had one lad there who originally English wasn't his first language in terms of coming to the UK. But we run with a rota system. So we treat it, we say to them, this is like a business. These people in the playground are your clients. You have to get the cases in. You have to sell mediation. You have to promote mediation. You have to have good relationships with the referrers and the teachers and the students. And what he would do is if someone was on a rota for a Monday and they were off sick or they were on a school trip, he would automatically go, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. And he started to do more cases than anyone else. And what he said to me was, at the age of 10, he went, I'm not good at maths and I'm not good at English. He went, but I'm the best mediator in this school. And he was. He absolutely was, because of the experience that he got in terms of doing that. And that's quite an important part. If you're considering mediation, and I'd like to hear maybe a little bit where you maybe thought this might work for you. And that doesn't have to be career-wise, because I think one of the things that I love about this job and what the team loves about this job is that it's as good as one of our senses. It's as good as everyone should be trained in this. Every child should be trained in mediation. You know, everyone should have the opportunity to go for a mediation. It's a cost-effective option. Even if you don't love the idea of a conflict resolution, it doesn't rock your boat, think about the money. When I go into an organisation to see if they would adopt mediation, I say to them, even if you don't like mediation, think about the cash, the amount of money that you spend trying to resolve it, going through court. I'll give you an example. We got involved with the local authority. They had cases of legal disrepair. You may have seen it on the news recently. People living in shoddy accommodation actually were saying to the council, I'm not going to pay my rent. The council would then take them to court to get that rent. And I actually witnessed a case like this before it came to mediation. And I watched the housing officer, the legal disrepair officer, the rents officer, the council solicitor. They had a barrister. This was all the money they were spending on their side. And then you had the one woman on the other side who was refusing to pay her rent because her house was in a state. And we went into a room and I was there to observe. And the council said, oh, Mrs. Williams hasn't responded to us. And the judge went, okay, let's come back in a month's time. And I thought, this is crazy. Why doesn't someone ask her the question that they asked in the letter? So we started to pick up cases. And I asked one of the solicitors, an external solicitor, how much it would take to take that to court and get, you know, whatever they needed. And he reckoned, with all the money they spent on it, it would be £30,000. £30,000 for the wages of the staff, for going to court, for hiring a barrister. It was just crazy. And at the end of it, the relationship between the landlord and the tenant was shot. You know, there weren't any winners at all in that. And I think that's what mediation is about. It's seeing, can we come up with something that we can work with? It's not soft and, do I look soft and fluffy? No, I'm not soft and fluffy. I'm realistic in terms of my agenda. It's about coming up with realistic options. People don't run to mediation because the person that they've fallen out with is the person that the mediator is actually saying, we need to sit down. We need to talk about this. We need to come through this. And I think, you know, that can be alien. People will say, I've done that, Dave. I've spoken to him. It's not worked. The power of mediation is the process, is the fact that when you decide to raise something, it's generally on your terms and your time. And I think you say, right, can we talk about this? The other person may not be ready. Mediation is a process that you book the time, you get the people to sign up that they want to resolve it, you pick the subject matter, and it's structured. There's also an opportunity to be flexible to say, whatever you've agreed today, let's come back in a month's time and see whether it's working. Does it need tweaking? Is there an opportunity to say what's worked? So it's a very flexible process and something that we don't think of as a natural thing to do. Of course, it's called alternative dispute resolution. I would like to be called as the first stage of resolution rather than an alternative, because I don't actually think the other ones are as successful as we automatically think they are. So why? So I think we've touched on genetic engineering on terms of that one. What do mediators do? Mediators get called into conflict situations. We don't get called in when it's going well. okay? We get called in when it goes wrong. So the first thing we do is we're going to slap the brakes on. That's putting the brakes on. This system, what's happening is out of control. And when we're in conflict situation, we sort of lose our focus, and it's about proving that we're right and actually demonizing the person on the other side. We are actually focused and tuned into the bad stuff. Now, as a mediator, one of the things you do, and if you look at victim offender, is that you rewind people. Okay, if you had a victim offender case where someone was found guilty of a crime, and I'll give you the first one that I ever done. We had a young lady who was training to be a solicitor. She'd moved from Leeds down to London. She was living in a tiny little flat while she was, attached to this legal practice. She was walking down the street, talking to her mum up in Leeds on her mobile, and a guy come up, grabbed her phone, knocked her over, and run off with it. Now, unfortunately for that young man, there was an unmarked police car just down the road that spotted it, so he got grabbed straight away. Now, what we done was to meet with the victim, and we asked them to tell us. So this crime happened at 12 o'clock, just after 12. She was on her lunch break. So what we done is we rewind her. You take that person back and say, what was happening at 11 o'clock? 11 o'clock, I was tidying up my work. I was heading towards my lunch break. I was thinking where I was going to get my lunch. I knew I had to call my mum. I promised I'd call my mum in Leeds. And then you lead them right up to the flashpoint. Bang, 12 o'clock, where worlds collide. You do exactly the same with the perpetrator. So when we met with the perpetrator of the crime, we asked him, what was you doing at 11 o'clock? It's leading up. I was standing with my friends. We were hanging around. We were bored. It was the school holidays. One of my mates see this woman with her phone, really snappy phone, and they went like, go on, grab her phone, grab her phone. And he said, in an instant, I just went and I grabbed it. So we led them right up to the time that their worlds finally met and collided, okay, and crossed. At that time, in terms of who they were, their backgrounds, their lives had nothing in common whatsoever. What brought them together was bang, that crime. Then what we do with them is to talk about the consequence, what happened after that. For that young woman on the phone, all her mum heard was a scream and the line went dead, okay? That was it. She had no idea what happened to her daughter in terms of that. For the young man, he was arrested. Obviously, they went to the police station, and then from there it rolled on. Then it became that he went to court in terms of what he'd done, and obviously he'd been found guilty. Now, for her, she was quite a strong cookie, but actually it did impact on her. She wanted to know, why me? Why did they pick on me? Is it because I look weak? Is that what it is? Do you know what I mean? Is this going to happen to me again every time I walk down that street? Am I going to see this guy again in the street? What's going to happen? Now, what we've done was we brought them together, and there was an opportunity for her or for us on her behalf to talk about 11 o'clock through to 12 o'clock and 12 o'clock up to the present day. Likewise, with the perpetrator, done the same, from 11 o'clock through to 12 o'clock, collide to what's happened afterwards. People are sharing their story and the consequences of it. So we're actually jumping in a time machine in terms of what we're doing, and we're taking them back in terms of what we're doing. So our time travel is we're taking people back, and we're actually looking at what happens. Now, what was interesting on that was the victim gets the opportunity to ask the perpetrator questions. And what really interested her was, how did you end up doing this? Why did you end up in crime? What's your family like? What's your mum like? Now, what happened to him was his mum was very religious, part of a big, wide church community. The whole idea of her son being arrested and going to court actually destroyed her. The family had disowned him, okay? No one was talking to him. She was distraught. She was constantly crying. She felt she couldn't hold her head up high in her community based on what her son had done. There was a massive consequence in terms of what he had done, not only impacting on this person whose phone they stole, on the mum who was petrified, who didn't want her daughter to work in horrible, grotty, dangerous London, as then that has panned out as to being true, that she will worry about her 24 hours a day now because she knows that crime happens, and it happened to her daughter in terms of what's going on. But this victim of the crime wanted to know about this person and asked them about it and got answers. the bizarre thing when I first done that one was when we come out of that mediation towards the end, what the victim said to the perpetrator was, because she asked him about what career he wanted, because all this now had been put in jeopardy. And she said to him, I actually hope you get your career back online. I hope things get better with your mum, and I hope things change. And I hope you never end up in this situation or get pulled into something like that in the future. When I come out of the room and I turned to this young person, the perpetrator, he was shocked. He never thought, he was so scared of coming in that room and facing the victim of the crime. But he said, I never thought someone would come out and want to wish me well, you know, actually cared about what I'd done. And it was like, I sort of felt his responsibility that he did not ever want to do that crime again or do that because of the impact it had. So a lot of it is about impact. Now, video editing, when you work with clients, it's interesting. One of the questions I ask anyone in mediation, any client, is this: whether I'm dealing with gangs, whether I'm dealing with workplace, whether I'm dealing with couples separating and divorcing, is this question. It might be a question you would like to ask someone you know who's in conflict. Two questions. How does the other person see you? Okay. Now, two people in conflict, you ask them the same question individually. How does the other person see you? Now, usually they will say awkward, aggressive, stroppy. Second question, why? Now, they usually bang on the money, because if you think about it like a film, when people are in conflict, whether you're having an argument with your partner or whether you're having an argument with someone in work or whatever it may be, there is a burst of energy and an exchange of communication, which is possibly negative. So at that moment in time, freeze frame, okay? So when I say why would they think like that? Oh, well, the last time we interacted, I shouted at them, I called them this, I stormed off. So that was their part of the film that they've seen. They've hit the pause button, so that is the only image they've got. So what we say is, okay, fine, we have the opportunity now to recreate the end of the film that you want. We get them to think about, actually, this person sees me in this way. You can be the nicest, calmest person in the world, but if you're wound up and you're angry, you're going to respond in a particular way. And what we need to take responsibility for is that's how people will remember us, as that freeze frame. So it's important people that come into mediation get the opportunity to understand that that is probably the image they have, and it's about them recreating one that's different. The impact, why was I upset? Why was I angry, in terms of what goes on? And it's also thinking about, we can recreate the end of that film. So in terms of video editing, you may have started with a film, but now you're going to re-edit that, and together you're going to come up with an ending to that film that you both need, okay? Bearing in mind, if you think about all the other agencies, because mediation is an alternative dispute resolution, I just need to check my time, make sure I've got time. If you think of all the other agencies that could get involved in workplace situations, which could be unions, which could be managers, could be HR officers. If you look at situations in the community, it's police officers, it's antisocial behaviour officers, it's courts. All those agencies, in a way, look back at the past and make a judgment on the past to try and establish possibly who's right and who's wrong, who's broke their tenancy agreement, who's broke their work contract. Let's see who's done that. Let's put that. Which person has done the most to each other in their relationship? Who's at fault? Who's not at fault? They look at it like that way. Mediation and mediators do look at the past, but they're actually also looking forward and getting both of those people to think about what changes. These are why, even if you don't want a career in mediation, I personally believe that mediation training and mediation skills is vitally important. It changed my life in terms of, you know, I was brought up in a quite rough part of South East London. My school was a failing school in Lambeth that I went to. You know, violence and aggression was a day-to-day thing that went on in our school and went on in our environment. I think our first knife fight I see was when I was about 10 at the Elephant and Castle. So these sort of exposure to high conflict, and the fact that as a child, we lived in a very old house and it was only 2 rooms. So me, my brother, my mum and dad were in 2 rooms at the Elephant and Castle. There was nowhere that you could escape tension or conflict. And you may, in your own life, be aware of what's happened in your own life.
Yes, we do have questions, and that was going to be one of my questions about the counselling. But we have a question from Kim. How important is it as the mediator that you talk to both parties individually before together?
I think it's very important that you do that, and I think, you know, they're able to talk open. If you think about, most situations are not equal. People do not communicate in an equal way. Even if you looked at couples, you know, there will be a difference in way they communicate. There may be a difference in terms of they could be intimidated by that other person. It's important that the mediator is able to hoover that up. So there's an opportunity when we're working with them, what we're taking from them is what will formulate how we open that session. So the other great part about that is that we're able, if you go to anyone in conflict and say to them, what's the problem? They go straight to the flashpoint. They go straight to the negative. As a mediator, remember the video editing, you rewind them. Has it always been like that? I mean, if you think of couples that get married and divorced, we don't stand at the aisle when we're getting married and look at each other and go, 7 years time, we're going to hate each other if we find it out in court. We don't think like that. We love that person. Okay, we've had children with that person. We've created a family. Okay, we didn't always feel like that. That would be crazy to do that. There was a time when it worked, whatever it was, it worked, or even with neighbours. It's possible, even if they haven't had anything and then suddenly a flashpoint. That's quite important. So to answer your question, it's very important you spend individual time, because you're getting what you need as a mediator and what you need for that process to get them through that stage. Any part of any mediation right at the beginning, it's very, people don't know what's coming. They're apprehensive. They actually say to me, this is never going to work. This is never going to work. They'll never change on that. So if we spend individual time with them, we get that information. And if we're in that individual session, you get to say, have you got any idea around, maybe you've told me how much this has impacted on you and how that situation went the last time you met. Have you got any idea in terms of how it may have impacted on them? Giving people the chance to reflect and go, yeah, okay, fair enough. You know, I called him a stupid bastard, whatever it was, excuse my swearing. I just wonder how that may have landed with him. Yeah, I know, yeah, well, to be fair, you know, I could have done it differently. And that's one of the other questions you ask people. If we were to go back in time, what would they need? This is how you structure it. What would they need to do differently? They go, oh, they need to do this. Second question, what would you do differently? Okay, now you've got both pieces of those information, those snapshots, those videos. When you come into mediation, you deliver them in a particular way. I get that information out to the clients in probably about a minute, 2 minutes maximum. But the other person gets to hear, because they don't want to listen to that other person, they will listen to the mediator because you've spent time with them. Hopefully they trust you. If they don't like you, they won't like mediation. So it's important you're able to bond with the people that you're working with, and that because you know that the other person, both sides, will listen when you drop that information and that it might stick. The other person saying it, they're like, not interested, their ears shut down. So individual time is vitally important.
So the next question is, how long does it take to become a mediator? We all want to be mediators now.
We all want to be mediators. That's great. That's what I like to hear. Right. I would never underestimate.
You know, for someone who is over the age of, you know, just finished university, we're all of a certain age, shall we say. What's the process? Is it worth retraining to become a mediator? Tell us. How do we join you?
Sure. Okay. I mean, it depends what field you want to go into, but generally trainings to go through a mediation, be trained in mediation, depending what field you go into, whether it be commercial or basic mediation skills, neighbour, workplace. Courses are generally.
Do you have to decide that before you start?
No, there are places. I mean, I would say in terms of, you know, the organisation I work with and some of the trainers I work with, we like to deliver. One, we like to do something that's a bit bespoke. I think there are organisations that just focus on workplace mediation or neighbour mediation or whatever it may be. I actually think there is a beauty in terms of going for a basic mediation course that gives you the framework of that, that you can maybe attach yourself to an organisation. Never underestimate the power of finding a local mediation centre and actually volunteering with them. Because I tell you what a lot of organisations do, which really aggravates me, is you will pay for training with them, and then what they do, these nice expensive ones that are going at the moment, they then give out our mediation centre's name and say, go and volunteer with them. So they don't actually give them the opportunity to use their skills, because that's important. Training's okay, but at the end of the day, you want to get in there and roll your sleeves up and work with an experienced mediator. And lots of community mediation centres give you that opportunity, the whole idea of working with clients. So to answer your question, the training is about 6 days. Then if you really want to be...
I thought we were going to say 6 years.
No. Training is 6 days. Then, depending on what field you're going into, you might need to do some observations. Family mediation is a little bit more difficult to get into because you have to find a family mediation centre. Generally, you have to get experience with them. You have to go through a portfolio in terms of working with children or working with cases of finance. So, pensions, selling of houses, there's different sort of breakaway fields. But I think I would say get yourself a basic mediation course. That can be accredited. A lot of community mediation centres like the one I work at the moment, Calm.
And is that what you search for? Sorry, do you search for, in order to find these places, community mediation centres?
Yeah, I think community mediation centres are a great place to start, okay, because it will show you and it will give you the chance. If you sign up with them and volunteer your time, we've put about 37 people over the years into paid mediation jobs. And one of the things I'm most proud of is one day when I was at the centre, one evening working late as I do, the cleaner come in, and it was the first time I'd actually met her. And I'm so sorry. I said, I really need to get out of your way. And she was like, no, it's all right. Don't worry. Anyway, I said to her, do you want a coffee? I'll make you coffee. So I went down, made a coffee. She sat down, and I said, sorry, we've never met each other before because, you come in late at night or early in the morning and I'm not here. So we started to chat, and she was a mum with 5 children, okay? And I said to her, so, what's your circumstances? What do you want to do? She went, well, Dave, I've got 5 kids. I can't do anything. And I said, what do you mean you can't do anything? I said, are they all at school? So she went, yeah. I said, well, why don't you try to be a community mediator? You can work during the day, volunteer of a day, get some skills. And she went, fine. I said, honestly, next course that comes up, you're on it. And she did. And she volunteered. And then she ended up working here as a mediation manager, a mediation practitioner. And I think she had limited herself by thinking what she could have possibly done. And I said to her, listen, Jane, I haven't got the most qualifications in the world in terms of doing that. And if I can do it, you can do it, in terms of what you're doing. And I said, you've actually got more management skills with 5 children than I'll ever have. So don't underestimate the power of, as I said, there's times when you probably have to be mediator, judge, policeman, all those sort of things, counsellor to your whole children, which was quite a wide range from late teens through to primary school. So don't underestimate the power. It doesn't have to be that your previous career is something close to mediation. Our blueprint in terms of who we are actually can inform that. So to answer your question, how long does it take to be a mediator? Most courses are about 6 days, shop about. If you want to contact me via Anna after this, you're more than welcome to. We can talk about what you're interested in. We can talk about what sort of courses that might appeal to you. But as a snapshot, get yourself a basic mediation course, find out whether you like it, find out if it works, get your opportunity to put some hours under your belt, and then you can springboard in other directions if you want to target. I mean, Simone, you might be more interested in the sort of legal mediation or cases that are coming from court. That may be something that works for you. But don't underestimate the power of going in a completely different direction. As I always say, it's all rock and roll.
And how long does it take? I mean, I think we're all quite shocked at the 6 days. But how long does it take to sort of become skilled in the role or proficient?
I would say, in terms of your experience, I mean, the mediation training can come with accreditation. So some courses you can do the accreditation. And so a lot of people put a lot of weight behind saying, I'm a trained mediator, I'm accredited. And I just say to them, yeah, how many cases you done? And they're like, well, I haven't done anything at the moment. I've just watched them. And I'm thinking, you know what, if I was faced with you, who just got accredited, and someone who'd done a basic mediation course that had done 6 or 7 cases, I'll take them, because I know they've been in the room. I know they've rolled their sleeves up. I know they've done it. And I think, you know, they learn from that. You know, why would you want to? And I had a couple of people recently who've done an accredited course and then, you know, went on and set their own business up, done their first mediation. And of course, they hit a roadblock, you know, because they knew as much as each other. And when you join a centre, you're working alongside an experienced mediator. You may be working, you know, it could be that you're working alongside me or one of my colleagues. As I said, most of the people that work at our centre, you know, again, my colleague Mel runs the peer mediation project. You know, she used to be the mediator for housing. In fact, we looked back at her caseload to see how many cases of actual bodily harm and GBH that she had, and she'd had the most. So we called her the Queen of Violence because there's more females in mediation than males, interesting enough. And I think that's because they're better listeners. There we go. Anyway, sorry, next question.
How much does it cost to become a...
Right, okay. Now this is another interesting one, is the fact that it depends how, there's an element of how you advertise on this. So we are aware that there are lots of mediation trainers that actually charge a lot. And I experienced this when I worked in the city. If they were calling someone in to deliver training, they would look, and because it's a city firm and they've got money, they would go, oh, they must be the best. They charge £3,000. This person over here charges £600. They must be rubbish. Okay. No, not necessarily, because some of the centres with the best training and the best knowledge are ones that are more community-based, not for profit. So ours is a charity. We've got, like, I've got 36 years experience. My colleagues have got 20, 25. So when they're delivering the training, that's what you get. But actually, if you've got a very super duper website and a nice glossy brochure, and actually your lunch is a bit more than a sausage roll, it's attractive. So to answer your question, training ranges from around about £400 or £500 through to up to £3,000, depending what you want. And again, like I said, it just that I actually phoned up some of these training firms and said, do you mind not giving our name out? Because it was upsetting me, because people would ring me up and say, Dave, I've done training and I'm accredited. Can I have some experience? And I'd say to them, what's in it for us? You never done our training, so now we're going to have to give you experience. If you want, you know, if you'd gone with us, you would have got your training cheaper, you would have got better quality training, and you'd have the chance to have experience. So, you know, I always say to them, it's a two-way street. Why do we get that? So to answer your question, it could be anything £400 or £500 up to £3,000, depending on who's delivering it and their website and their lunch, really.
Right. And in terms of, I just want to like really hone in on the process to make sure that if I signed up next week and I do my training for 6 days and I pay £600, whatever, how long does it then take for me to actually be able to work as a mediator?
Well, I think the point on that one is get as much experience under your belt. Okay, you know, if you're with a centre in terms of doing that, they will be commissioned by local authorities, police departments, HR departments, so they will have cases coming through. Then it's down to you. Then you have to think about, I had a friend who, you know, wanted to get into mediation. I said, look, you can do our training, but if you're that keen, you'll make yourself available. You get as many hours as you can under your belt. You know, you might even join 2 centres. You know, you might do one, might join 2 community centres, get the work that's coming in, get the opportunity to observe people in terms of doing that. So I would say get as many cases as you can under your belt. And then if you're in a position, depending on what you want to focus on, is schools, special educational needs, there's mediation that goes on there, where mediators are involved in that. You might want to join an organisation. They might want to give you some conversion training in terms of what you do and how you do it, because there are differences between processes from commercial mediation to community, but I always think the grounding is good. So it's how many cases you get under your belt and experience, because at the end of the day, if you're going to set up in your own business, then you need to be able to prove that you've done the cases or you've been attached to someone or someone can give you a recommendation. But don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking accreditation from these organisations because they would charge that. it is obviously a way of monitoring if people have met a standard. Our one is Open College Network. We need to make sure that's done. They meet that, then obviously we will pass them out. That costs a bit more money to do that, because there's a bit of homework involved in it and putting a little bit of a portfolio together. So I'm not knocking accreditation, but I would say don't underestimate the power of experience. Yeah. I mean, to go back to Sean, who was based in HR, I mean, I would have thought when I took to people from HR, there is a natural role that you could possibly do, but and think, oh, I could have set up my own business as a HR consultant, also mediate. I mean, that is an option. What I would say is be mindful of that. Don't let your previous job affect the way that you work, because the mediator, one of the most biggest learning curves of the mediator is not to make judgment, not give them the answers, and not fall back into your old career and go, well, actually the law is, we all know what the law is. If it worked, we wouldn't be sitting in the mediation room. So just think about that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, totally. And I suppose that's because I genuinely find this like so inspiring. I kind of genuinely want to go out and become a mediator. But then I also think I'd probably be rubbish, because I would have too much of my own, baggage, my own judgment, my own stuff going on. But then how do you in 6 days, I guess, train that away?
Yeah, well, I think when you do, and a lot of people get freaked out when you say role play. I mean, honestly, it's not as bad as that. But when you actually put someone in the role, and even if they're in fours, you've got 2 mediators and 2 clients, you'll go with a standard role play, come up with a conflict or a scenario. As a trainer, I'd be walking around that room, and I know I made those mistakes. I would say in 36 years, there is not a mistake you possibly could make that I haven't already made, right, in abundance. So you will find yourself, and when I train, they're going, what you need to do is, and it'd be like, It's like, because as soon as and it may be the answer. This is the point. You may actually have the answer, but if you give the answer or give the recommendation, it's yours. And if it goes wrong, it's your fault, okay? In terms of doing that, you need to, and obviously you're trained on how to get that information out of people. And actually say, how many options have you got and possibilities of how you could do this differently? And even if it's they've gone through 3 and they've not got the one in the back of your mind, obviously you can go fishing and say, is there any, George, have you got any more? Maybe George is going to come up with it or not. And even if it's a case of, if this doesn't work in the next couple of weeks, let's come back, let's look at it and see if there's any more options that we can do. So there's ways in which you're getting people to open their minds and come up with various options. And if they come up with them, it's their agreement, and it's not, if they want that, go to court, go to a judge.
Yeah. So we have one more question. How easy is it to volunteer or work for a community centre? Are they usually keen on new people, and is it difficult to get in?
No, I mean, it depends what part of the world you live in. I mean, mediation is all over the UK in terms of, centres. And doing that. So I think it's look for your local centre. I'm attached to, I work in Southwark in London for our mediation centre, Calm. But I'm also a volunteer mediator with another centre in Surrey, where my partner works, where my partner lives. So, I'm down there some of the time, and I know the coordinator because she was out of our stable. We trained her, and now she's the CEO of Surrey Mediation. So I volunteer there. So how easy is it? Get on the internet, have a look at what mediation centres are local to you. If you're volunteering, in which you are, and bearing in mind, if you've done any sort of counselling course or, you would be doing that for free anyway. But attach yourself, find out what they are. Some charge, some don't, in terms of it. So sometimes you can get free training, but you need to step up. And I will say this, and I'll be strict with you, don't take their training and don't do their volunteering. That is an outrage, okay? Because you could be stopping someone else. And actually you're shooting yourself in the foot, because, a lot of people will come and go, I'm a professional, I've done the training, I've got it. And then walk away. We used to get that quite a lot from people, and now we're quite straight with them and saying, don't take our training and disappear. Some centres will say, you need to pay some money, and if you get it refunded when you've done the volunteering. Also, you can do the mediation. Some centres, we on occasions, if someone approaches us and says, I want to pay for the training, but I don't want to volunteer, then they might want to pay a bit more. That allows us to offer it to someone else free in the community, or someone who can't afford to do it, or maybe funds our work in schools. So we can actually say, do you know what? No, you don't have to volunteer. That's what you wanted to do. Thank you for being open with us. That's going to cost you a little bit more money in terms of doing that. But your money is going to go and fund our schools work, or fund someone who can't afford our work. Yeah. So just to say, I volunteered, right? And I am where I am today. I never thought that I would actually be asked to go to Turkey by the Home Office to train police officers in Turkey in community engagement. I never thought I'd go to Greece to open a mediation centre out there for a law student that I bumped into. I gave a pitch to law students, and the guy at the end from Greece came up to me and went, do you know what? He went, I'm going back to Greece and I'm going to start my own mediation centre. And I patted him on the back and I went, good luck with that. And he did. He went back. His mum was a Conservative mayor. His principality was socialist. He brought the socialist MP together with the Conservative councillor, which was his mum, and he got them to work together, and they funded a mediation project in Greece, right? And he phoned me up and he'd done it, and he invited us out there for the opening. I was like, I was gobsmacked in terms of doing that. I never thought that I'd be doing this role. It has given me so much as an individual. And like I said, even if you think of any career that you want, if you've got mediation skills, it makes you more attractive. Our students in schools that go for university places, I always say to them this: there's like 6,000 cello players going for Oxford. There's not many mediators. It's a unique skill. And if for a job, if they know they're employing a mediator that resolves conflict rather than getting involved in it, you're more attractive to them in terms of the role that you do. The fact that you've done volunteering, even more, another box ticked. Don't underestimate the power of doing that. It will give you so much. We should have these skills trained to us throughout. I was lucky, I got made redundant. I ended up in the place where I am. Out of body experience, just want to say on that one, that one is where we get people to stand and look at what someone else is probably seeing of them. Okay, remember that question we asked, how does the other person see you? Jump out your body. And finally, donuts. We've got a Greg's next door, and after I finish this, I will be having my donuts. So there you go. It's lovely meeting you. If you want to talk to me again, go through Anna. If you've got any more questions you want to spend some time.
I mean, gosh, thank you so much. It has been absolutely amazing. I hope that Evelyn, Kim, Simone, that you've got everything out of it that you wanted. Any other questions? I'm just going to be brazen enough and say, send them to me, and I'm going to send them to Dave. And yeah, this was fantastic. I'm really quite inspired by this.
Good.
And also, final teeny weensy little question. I really, obviously having two boys, I find that mediation in school would be a good idea.
Absolutely.
How do I get my school to introduce that? Is that also through?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, again, talk to a mediation centre, talk to me, to find out what area you're in. I may be aware of the mediation centre down there. You know, as I said, we get commissioned all over the place to live up here. There may be a centre in your area that's actually doing that. You know, but yeah, give me a call, and yes, you should. And I love it. The sooner you get it in. I had a parents' evening can't say, we find if you train one mediator in a family out of the children, the others follow suit. We once had one family, had 2 teenage mediators in 2 different schools and a 10-year-old brother that was in mediation. Parents say to us, can I train to be a mediator? One woman said to me, what have you done to my daughter? I went, what do you mean? She went, well, she used to have an argument with me, shout at me, go up in a room, slam the door and put music on. She went, now she's a mediator, she wants to talk to me. Right? So I had one 10-year-old.
Careful what you wish for.
So just one very brief story. We trained a 10-year-old in a school, and when we went to give out their certificates, the parent came up to me and she said, I don't think me and my husband will ever get divorced. And I said, why is that? She went, because we've got a mediator in the family. So I said, really? She went, the other night, he wanted to watch the football, my husband. I wanted to watch the film. We're having an argument, and my son, 10 years of age as a mediator, went, well, sorry, stop. Mum, would you like to join me in the kitchen, please? And he took her into the kitchen. He took her account. He took her out. He went, Dad, would you like to come into the kitchen with me? He took his account. He sat down on the buffet in front of the settee, and he mediated them. He mediated them in terms of what they needed, what was said. And she went, I don't think we'll ever get divorced now, because this 10-year-old is mediating an issue over who watches.
I hope they're putting all of their money to him instead of that.
Yeah,
divorce.
they should do. There you go. Lovely meeting you. Maybe I'll
Thank
speak
you
to
so
you
much.
again.
I'm so grateful. Great session. Totally agree with that. And don't forget to subscribe to newsletters and upgrade to your memberships and all those sorts of things. Any questions, please just send them my way. Anna@bravestarts.com. That's me.
Lovely.
Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you so much, Dave.
Take care. Bye-bye.